All right, welcome back. In case you have been with us, we appreciate your company. And if you're just joining us, we want to start our conversation this morning on the state of the nation from the point of view of religious leaders. We want to understand the church and what it says about the going-ons in our country. And I'm hosting this morning a panel of three gentlemen. From my far right, we are having Reverend Dr. Elias Otieno Agola. He is the National Chairperson of the National Council of Churches of Kenya, also known as NCCK. Thank you, Reverend. And we are also having this morning Alhaj Hassan Olenado. He's the chairperson of SUPKEM. Thank you for coming. And Bishop Kefa Omae, the chairperson of the Kenya Council of Church Alliances and Ministries, KCCAM.
Thank you, Safini, for having us.
Thank you so much for creating time. And of course, there's a lot that has been happening, and I know we will be weighing in on some of the concerns that the church has with regards to how the country is being run and what's the best way forward. But just maybe a point to start. I was looking at the story on the Standard on the front page, and just out of curiosity, I'd also like to hear the voice of the church on this whole conversation around whether we still have an opposition in our country, because suddenly we are seeing the strong voices that for a very long time we thought were the ones that were to put the government in check. Suddenly it's almost like these days everyone is reading from the same script. Questions have been asked as to whether we still have a strong opposition that can represent the interests of Kenyans when they are feeling aggrieved by the excesses of the government. And you can see there on the front page, our president has been very angry in the last few days with regards to what he says is people questioning every move, every policy, every development project he's trying to work. Nobody is letting him work. But then again, we are seeing key opposition figures coming very strongly and asking Kenyans, let the government work. This was not quite usual. I don't know what you think about the status of affairs when it comes to the existence of opposition in our country from the church's perspective. I'll begin with you, Alhaj Hassan.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think in our setup, in our political setup as a country, Kenya, unfortunately, is too political. And we tend to think that all our issues and affairs and everything else surrounds around politics of a country. And politicians, being who they are, they'd always go to the battered side of the bread. And they may not actually, any given time, carry with them the wishes of the people they lead. And this was expected because what had happened where we came from as a country most recently with the GNC demonstrations, I think the political class tried to want to address the problem through a political platform than actually looking at the issues that were being raised by Kenyans, that we have this problem and that. But now they thought the only solution to what the Kenyans want is actually a political realignment. And that is what we are seeing now, that attempt to, we have the political class on one side and the Kenyans on the other. And that is where the religious sector are actually stepping in because of the vacuum that has been created. Because the political class have a common interest and a common agenda. Their agenda and interest is to remain in leadership, in power, not necessarily to address the problems Kenyans are facing. So I think for us now, we have no option but to fill the gap, because the people we speak for are the same people we expected the political class to speak to. But unfortunately, when they somehow desert the work that they were supposed to do, then the only thing that can only remain to be done is the religious sector as the conscience of the moral conscience of the society to step up and say, this is wrong, and try to provide a way forward.
Reverend, I don't know whether from your perspective you have also observed the vacuum that Alhaj is describing. Do you think Kenyans are deserted as he is putting it across?
Yes, thank you, Safin. Kenya, in Kenya we tried to help the country by fixing the Constitution 2010. And that is when we thought that Kenya is going to be aligned to a good governance structure. And the politicians have always thought that they are the only leaders in this country. they need to understand that even the agitation for the new constitution was started by religious institutions, and especially the church for this matter. You can recall the issues of Fungamano initiative, the New Kenya initiative. All these came to address the issue and the concern that politicians think that they are the only people that are having the leadership position in this country. And that's why when one feels that I'm no longer in government, they look for ways of getting into the government and then leave the people without the political voice that can address their issues. Do we have opposition in Kenya? Well, in the constitution, there is nothing like the opposition. There is the majority and the minority. But here we have people who have to be counted to be talking on behalf of the people from the political class. But what has just happened is that the people who are supposed to be doing that and who are in the structures of governance in this country have crossed over. And now you hear, if you look at the Standard today, somebody has put is it a horn speaker?
Yeah.
And who are there? You see the people who are meant to be checking the government are the same people who are now changing the tone. Now, that is what we are saying as leaders in this country, that we step in also, not that we have not been speaking, not that we have not addressed these issues in private. The political class know that we have already addressed these issues with them in private. So when you hear the religious institutions from all over talk about the ills that are going on in this country, we are now also amplifying our voices and the voices of the people that we serve, the people that we are with every day, the people that we meet in our fellowships, the people, the Kenyans that are suffering. This is when we come in and say, we are only talking about the issues that we have been raising. And so nobody should be there to say that it is now that our voices are coming up.
So you've been addressing these issues in private, that's what you're saying.
And they know. And with those in opposition, and with those in government, and those who are supposed to be in opposition. And we tell them Kenya is going to the ICU economically and totally in governance, because issues that we are raising are touching on the common mwananchi.
Right.
Do they listen? Yes, maybe they listen, but how do they listen? They listen sometimes to react, and react sometimes in anger. But we are only saying, please have a moment to think about this person that elected you. Have a moment to think about this country that you have as your inheritance. We are not going anywhere. We are in this country. And so we are leaders. Why don't we listen to one another? Do we listen to respond, or do we listen to understand what these other people are raising?
What people are raising. Rev, thank you for saying that. We'll also look at those issues that you have been raising and how they affect Kenyans. But Bishop, just coming to you, I look at the Gen Z demonstrations as a season that was heralding a new era in our country. It was sort of like a point of enough is enough for Kenyans, speaking very strongly about the pain and the weight that they were feeling at that moment, something that has never happened before, in our country. I don't know whether, from your perspective, you feel we utilized that very crucial moment in our history, or it was a missed opportunity.
Thank you very much, Safini. Let me begin by saying that the coming in of the Gen Zs, I want just to go straight to what you have asked, was a wake-up call to all of us as leaders in this country. that speaks of the current administration in government and to all leaders across the board. Because if you picked up what the Gen Zs were actually protesting about, the issues that are affecting Kenyans, beginning with the youth, talk about the common mwananchi, etc. And you realize that when our leaders, the political class, were campaigning to get into leadership, they made promises. There were manifestos, there were promises that were made, and a number of these promises actually bordered on what is ailing Kenyans. Now that the government was formed, we have on one side the current leadership, the administration that is, and then of course we have those who are on the other side, who are not in government. Precisely, we have the Kenya Kwanza, and we have the Azimio, and all the other political formations. Now let's talk about the government. Their pledges for sure, His Excellency made together with his team. And if you looked at the manifesto very closely, and if you listened to the campaign promises that were made by our government, you realize a number of those things were and are the same issues that the Gen Zs and even the current, even right now, Mwananchi is asking what happened. And just coming to what you have mentioned and cited on today's paper, the truth is, Kenyans, I think, are hungry. Not I think, they are angry because what they thought will happen has not happened. But we should not also forget Rome was not built in a day. I think what has happened is that whereas, the government is trying their best to making sure that they deliver on the promises, you would begin to see some agitation in that what we thought has not been really accomplished. I know the president, for example, made promises and pledges together with his team. Let's also appreciate that there is much which has been done. We can't say nothing has been done. Much has been done. But the question I think Kenyans are asking is, do we feel the change? Do we feel that impact? Talk about the economy, for example. Do we feel the impact of the economy to the extent that Kenyans are left with some shillings in their pockets to take care of the basic needs? I think that's what Kenyans are asking. Yes, there is the development side, but what about the common mwananchi? Is that felt? What is this that's closer in the heart of Kenyans that need to be addressed as we also focus on the development aspects in this country? So what the Gen Zs raised up were pertinent issues, and it will be unfair, it will be naive for us actually to shelve those issues that the Gen Zs raised up. They are the same issues every Kenyan in this country is concerned about. Look at the rate of unemployment, for example. We are actually offloading so many graduates from our universities, but where are they? Very few of them are assimilated, for example, in the job market. But at the same time, we are saying, what are these opportunities that can be provided not only by government, but even by the private sector to assimilate, the graduates that we are offloading from our universities, etc. So you look at some of those issues, talk about the economic factor, talk about the unemployment challenge, etc. There are so many issues that we have articulated in our memoirs, in our pressers. We have said them again and again. And I think these are the things Kenyans want addressed. Addressed
urgently, as soon as yesterday.
As soon as yesterday.
We will get into the nitty-gritties of those issues. But let's go back to where it all began. Many are asking, why now? Why is the church coming out? And we've seen in the recent weeks the church has actually become the strongest critics of the President William Ruto's administration. A word that has been going round, and this is not news, is they're accusing the administration of what they call the culture of lies. And this is based on, the failed promises that the church is saying, President Ruto and his administration has not fulfilled. I want to hear your thoughts, Alhaj. Do you think Kenyans were duped, that we were lied to?
Yeah, one thing actually first I want to correct is the use of the church whenever we make reference to religious institutions.
Yeah.
Because we don't belong to the church ourselves. So whenever we refer to the church, then we're actually leaving out Muslims, Hindus, and every other people who doesn't use the church. So I think it is also important to take note of that. Secondly, is the struggle of the democracy in this country. The chairman of NCK mentioned that the church played a critical role. There was actually no time that the church was alone in the struggle of Kenya democracy. The Muslims, leaders of this country, played a very, very critical role, just the same way the independence and many other initiatives that were meant to better this country. But coming to the question that you are actually asking about what is now being said about the president, I think people are actually suffering. People are facing a lot of hardships. And when people find themselves in a situation that they cannot even meet the basics, of their lives, they tend to react in different ways. And in our position, some of the positions that we have actually taken before, especially as Muslims, immediately after the GNC demonstration, we said that there are issues that the government can actually fix, just like this, through policies and legislation, because it has that capacity of doing that.
So those immediate fixes.
Those immediate things. And there are those which are long-term things, which, of course, no Kenyan is expecting that to be made to fix immediately. The third part of it, and that is why people are becoming restless, even the basics that can be fixed through legislation and policy are not being done. So when we talk about, for example, the job market, you cannot talk about creating jobs when when factories are closing down, when the economy is closing down. Where will you get the jobs? Because what is happening now, Kenyans are actually, the few who are working in some places, those places are closing down. Why? Because of the taxes, We have a situation where our budgets, the large amount of money that we budget for, are corruption. The budgeted corruption, that the things that we are facing. So to us, from where I sit, those are the things that the government of the day have to fix, because they are easy to be fixed. We have institutions that deal with the corruption, which should just be made to move and act immediately, so that at least that we discourage people from being corrupt. Because what happens if the only motivation we have in this country is for you to be a thief? Because for you to have what other people have, to drive a good car, to have a good house, you have to steal. So that culture of theft has to be dealt with. And there is no better way of doing it unless it is actually done and Kenyans become satisfied. Second item that you can actually be able to track the development of this country. Just look at the reports that are being given out by the Control of Budgets, the Auditor General. What are we doing about this? When you have a county, the government, that has 300 bank accounts, surely it doesn't make any sense. How can you run 300? I was actually asking the chair that, do you even remember who signs this account?
Is it even realistic?
How do you do that?
If as an individual operating 3 or 4 is even
exactly. And then Kenyans, we are just sitting down and complaining. I think the only option now that's remaining with us is to build a movement of citizens that ensures that every item that is actually raised by the control of budgets and the Auditor General is tracked to the ground and ensure that why is this not happening this way? Because if we allow these budgets to be, we have this budget and that item and that item, and then nobody checks whether that thing has been happening, it is not possible. The third item is we are being told, and that's the reality, that we face challenges because of the debts that the country has. Then we go further and borrow locally very expensively than actually what we normally get from the other financial institutions. So If our own resources that are locally available are so expensive, and then we still go to that expensive amount of money, and then there are supposed to be other cheaper options, then you find that we are actually not getting out of it. But the worst part of it, where does this money go? Because if today Kenya can actually stop corruption from where we have reached, and then we start doing things the way they are supposed to be done, this country, God has blessed. We still have opportunities of turning back this economy and moving forward. But as long as those are not done, the religious sector will speak today, they'll speak tomorrow, and the day after, and no change will happen. Unless the need for us to have a conversation about what are those basics that we want to see. We want to see our children back to school. We want to see our health sector working and functioning. And we don't want really a lot of PR things to be done, that this is whatever. We want things that are practical.
You actually want to
and
see
things
action,
that
not
work.
just
Not just things that we are being told it is going to work. And then the other day you see members of parliament sitting on their own, and you don't know why they're actually discussing a very critical component of our lives on their own without citizens. And then you ask yourself, then what are they going to do after the deliberations in the Speaker's Kamkunji? So when they talk about how the SHA and other things are working, then who are they talking to? Because to me, I wanted to see that communication on the ground where the common mwananchi is, and is being told how things are going to work. And finally, when the president came into leadership, the current president, he came in when we were still in the crisis of the CBC. Syllabus of education. And he made a promise to Kenyans that as soon as I get into leadership, one of the first things I will do, we are going to fix this problem. He came in, he did exactly what he said. He had an appointment, he appointed over 100 committee, the biggest, I think I've never seen such the biggest task force I've ever seen, to try to address the problem. But even up to today, we are still where we were when the promise was made. We want to see such things being fixed, and fixed urgently, so that our systems can start working.
Yeah, and Rev, the unfortunate bit though is what Alhaji is saying. We are still where we are, because these issues that you're raising this morning are not new. Matters of corruption and employment, misuse of public funds. These are things that have sort of like turned like a perennial crisis in our country. Kenyans have raised it. Voices have come from different quarters discussing the very same issues. Where do you think the problem is? Why doesn't it seem like we are coming out of this dark hole that our country seems to be in when it comes to these matters?
Good question. Sheikh has raised a lot of the issues that are pertinent. Where is the problem? To get into that straight away is that if you realize that you have promised your children 1, 2, 3, and 4 because you thought you are going to get enough to accomplish your promises, what should you do? You should go back to the drawing board, and you should look for a way to let people understand that what I promised you is not going to be doable, and this is the reason why I'm not going to do it. But you cannot promise me something, keep quiet, don't talk, and when you come to me not to deliver what you promised, but to take away what I have. The problem is ignoring the voices that are telling us the truth.
So there's a deliberate...
There is a deliberate action to just ignore what the other leaders are telling this person. And what we are coming to say as religious institutions is that we cannot all be wrong. That all of us are saying the same thing, all of us are raising the same issues, all of us are going back to your script, your manifesto, and we are saying you promised 1, 2, 3, and 4. We are seeing the opposite. The truth of the matter is that you cannot take us to be all wrong and you are the only person who is right. And if you have advisors, they should advise you using our scripts and saying, these people are raising 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do we have any truth in what they are raising? Do we have any trace of what you promised that you have not done? One day, there was a address to the nation from State House, and you can replay that. The president said, I think my communication department did not work well. That is the problem. You have very good things for us. You are talking so high about Kenya and what Kenya is supposed to be and how it is supposed to be. How are you being helped by your people to communicate this to the common mwananchi in the language that they are going to understand?
All right.
Now, what is the problem? The problem is that you have ignored the voices that are telling you the truth. You have ignored the Gen Zs when they raised it. In fact, they were abducted, killed, maimed, and Kenyans are still angry with what happened. But do you think Gen Zs just went home? Do you think they are doing nothing? Do you think they are thinking nothing? Much as they are quiet, does it mean they are silent? Does it mean they are not regrouping? And will you handle that? We are your colleague leaders. We are telling you Kenya is not on the right path. Kenya is in the wrong path. So ignoring the Gen Zs, now you are ignoring the voices from other leaders, the religious leaders to be specific. Are you going to ignore these citizens who are getting enlightened every day?
Every day.
Are you going to, how are you going to handle the issue of civic mobilization that is going on? The private sector may also begin to face you and tell you something is wrong. I think we are only speaking the truth, and that is what we are ordained to do.
All right. Rev, those are very weighty questions, if you ask me, things to ponder about as we find, the best strategy to put this country back on the right trajectory. We'll be discussing this after the break, having a panel of 3 gentlemen from the religious point of view. What is the status of affairs in our country? That is what we are dissecting this morning. Allow us to take a very short break right now. We are coming back with much more.